Hi. Welcome to the Sales Podcast.
Whoa, what episode is this? You say 413?
Can you say 414?
And that, my friend, is the first ever introduction to the Sales Podcast by Ava Isabella Schaefer, while sucking a lollipop and wearing half of her mermaid outfit. That's the benefit and the joy and the pleasure and the bonus of working for yourself and doing your own podcast, as the wife comes to check in, mortified that my baby is half dressed. Although there is no camera showing this episode. This is actually the 413th episode of the Sales Podcast. We've got Lee Hartley Carter on. She is the author of this very good book that I've been reading. And if you've listened to this for any amount of time, you know I've had quite a few storytellers on. And I do that because it's important. Repetition is the key to learning. You need to understand the importance of telling stories and even humor. My kids all the time are saying, oh, great, here comes an analogy from Dad. Here comes a parable from Dad. But you know what? It works. It sticks. It's not an accident that Jesus told a bunch of parables about mustard seeds and finding coins and lost sheep. He met his listeners where they were, and then he took them where he wanted them to go. You have to do the same thing now more than ever. There's too much information, right? There's too much access to information, and a confused mind says no. Our prospects are confused, they're tired, they're overwhelmed, and if you just jump right into the facts, good luck with that. I don't know if I came by this naturally. I did to a degree, but I have fostered it. I have nurtured it, worked on it to consciously get better. You can and should and need to do the same thing. So you're in for a treat with this interview. If you recognize the need to get better at connecting with people through stories, come join me in 30-Day Sales Growth, 30daysalesgrowth.com. It is super affordable, and I will hold you accountable. I will push you. It's still a small group, which means you get focused attention from me. If you ask questions, you'll get them answered. We do live calls now on Mondays, so they're video calls. I usually have a limited set topic I'm going to discuss, so I leave room for Q&A. I leave room for people to ask questions and bring up issues, and as long as it's relevant, it's not too off topic, we'll dive in. We'll look at your website, we'll look at your sales pages, we'll look at your email sequences, your marketing material, help you connect with others. So come hang out with us, 30daysalesgrowth.com. Now let's bring on our guest, Lee Carter, author of Persuasion. Do I have to say like Persuasion with that big magnet, or just
you
Persuasion?
Could.
I could. Author of Persuasion, convincing others when facts don't seem to matter. All the way from New York City. Welcome to the show. How the heck are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited about this conversation.
Hey, I've been reading the book. I love your story. I have a very personal interest in this. I love how you were talking about finding your voice, finding your passion, distilling down like what you do to get the word out. So I don't care if our listeners get anything out of this. I know I'm going to get a lot out of it. You know what I'm saying? Is that selfish to say? I'm just saying the truth, right? Isn't that part of persuasion? Just tell the truth.
It is. Telling the truth and being authentic, I think, is really, really important.
Okay. All right. Hold that thought. We use that word too much. Everywhere I see, be authentic, be transparent. Then people are like sharing their, I don't know, they got a wart on their big toe. I'm like, okay, dude, that's like a little too transparent and authentic. Can we overdo it?
Yeah, of course we can. I think the key to being authentic and transparent is to make sure that you're talking about and reaching out in a way that's meaningful to the person you're trying to connect with. I think oftentimes what people are doing is just oversharing, trying to be transparent or authentic for authentic's sake. It's really, this all starts with trying to understand who it is you're talking to and reaching out to them and not trying to overdo it. You've got to be true to who you are, but really reaching out where they.
Yeah, I feel like people are they're becoming caricatures of themselves, right? They're like being transparent just to be transparent. It's like, dude, yeah, you don't share that. That's
totally true.
That's not moving the needle.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that people are doing in addition to that is they're just, instead of trying to really connect and reach out, people are just shouting louder and thinking that you need to share everything. And it's really not about trying to persuade. It's just about trying to share your own opinion and thinking that if you just say it louder, if you just amplify it more, then you're going to resonate or have more of an impact. And I just don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, a friend of mine, he has like a blog post, or I don't know if he was writing a book about it, but it was like, just make the logo bigger, right? And dealing with clients, can we just make the logo bigger? It's like, it's not going to do it. That's not going to convey the message. It's kind of like the whole just say it louder sort of concept. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I often say if they can't hear you, it's not their fault. And I think what we end up doing all the time is like, if people only knew XYZ, then they'd like us, or they'd buy our product, or they'd want more of whatever. And it's just not the case. People get really frustrated and think to pepper people with facts or more information that's going to change their minds. And that's not the way we operate as human beings. We operate in a very, very very different way. We're emotional creatures. We look for connection. And I think that's what this is all about, is trying to connect with other people and find ways to move and shift their perception.
Does everyone want to connect? Do Antifa people want to connect? I don't feel like they want to connect.
Well, I think that the most important thing, right, is that people, you have to look at what your objective is when you're trying to, I always say, like, the first step in all of this is to big and really think about what is it that you're trying to have. So with Antifa, when people are really out there, are they trying to speak to themselves, or are they trying to convince others of their point of view? I think in many cases, if you're really honest with yourself, what you're trying to do is get more people who are just like you to agree with you. And that's not about persuasion. If your objective really is to change somebody's mind, then you have to do things differently. But by and large, I think most people out there are not really trying to persuade. They're trying to say, let me just reach my audience more and more and get us more ginned up and more excited. And that's not what persuasion is.
Yeah, amen. And I love I don't know, is it your calling? Is it your cause? Talking about, people being more empathetic, so we can really have conversations. But can we teach empathy, right? Because I've got one of my initial sales training programs is called the Better Prospecting, BETR. It's bonding, empathy, trust, and rapport. And I've always said, great salespeople have great empathy. And maybe I've been successful at pulling it out of people, but I don't know if I've ever taught someone to be empathetic. Is that possible?
Yeah. So this is a big debate we had when I was working on the book with a couple of different people. And a lot of people say you can't teach empathy. And I say that you can. But here's my caveat. Most people have natural empathy, like 99.9% of people, outside of sociopaths, psychopaths, and maybe narcissists who don't have the ability. Most people do. The thing is that people assume that it's natural. We have a natural empathy for people who are just like. That's why you have empathy for your children. You have empathy for people in your family. You have empathy for your partner because you understand where they're coming from. And it's just sort of natural. So for the most part, people have natural empathy. What I teach in the book is something I call active empathy. And active empathy is when you have to put yourself in somebody else's shoes when you might not already understand them, when you're predisposed almost to disagree with them or not understand where they're coming from. That's when I think empathy is most important in persuasion, is because this isn't about you at all. It's actually about reaching that other person or that other target audience and putting yourself in their shoes. And you absolutely can do it. It requires you to step out of yourself in three different areas. First, understand, why do they believe what they believe? Second is, why do they feel what they feel? And the third is, why do they do what they do? You can understand those three things. That's when you can really start to turn things around. And I want to be really clear, empathy is not an endorsement. Because you have empathy for someone does not mean you agree with their perspective. It means you understand it. And if you understand it, that's when you can start to work with it. But if you don't understand it, you're just going to end up sort of talking past them.
Right. So it makes sense. The struggle, I guess, that people have is, it seems like people can't think, right? There's no deductive reasoning. It's like we have two generations that have never taken debate in school, and it shows, right? They just get mad at each other. There's no, I think it was Niels Bohr, one of those smart dudes way back in the day, said basically to have a great mind can basically hold two opposing thoughts and not go crazy, right? Whereas like a weaker mind will grab their thought and disparage the other, right? And so it seemed like we don't have very many great minds today.
I think it's just part of culture. And that's unfortunate because culture today has us very, very tribal, very, very insulated. We consume the information that reinforces our opinion. We don't necessarily read or reach out and try to understand other points of view. And because of that, we get so entrenched in our opinion that you almost get angry if somebody disagrees. You can't imagine why anyone would disagree with you. You can't imagine that somebody might believe something different than you do. And it ends up with this sort of constant anger, agitation, outrage at people trying to have conversations across the aisle. And it's not even just with the younger generations. It's happening across the board because more and more we're just associating and picking up information that already reinforces our opinion. And I think it's really important that we remember this is not a new phenomenon. It's not new that people don't necessarily just pick up new information and change their mind. We are predisposed to discard information that contradicts anything that we already believe. It's behavioral science that allows us to do that. And that's because as human beings, we recognize patterns. And so we pick up things that reinforce patterns that coalesce with what we already believe, and we discard anything that goes against it. And occasionally something will be so outrageous that it causes us to pick up and be like, wait, what is that? What do I do with that? But that's sort of the way it's always been. But because of the way we consume information now, because we are not really in a place where you are surrounded by information on all sides, you just pick up what you already believe. And it becomes harder and harder and harder to break through. And then as a matter of practice, people just don't engage in conversations. They engage in fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. So how does this work in sales? Oh, I'm a Ford guy. We'll never change our fleet. Oh, you're from Chevy. Yeah. I'm not taking any calls from the Chevy sales. I mean, how can we win over that dug in buyer?
Yeah, I think that again, it's the same principles that really apply. I think that one, the first thing is we have to get really, really clear on our target audience, who they are, what they believe, why they feel the way they feel. And once we understand all those different things, then we're able to find ways to inject ourselves into the conversation. So first, it really starts with the empathy. So that person who's entrenched, why do they believe what they do? Why do they do what they do? Why do they feel that way? What values are at stake? What is so important to them? So then you can start to try to find your narrative that's it. So I think that it always starts with that. The second thing is once you understand that, and only once you understand who it is that you're talking to and why they've that, then you can find the thing, I call it your master narrative. What is the one thing that you want them to know and remember, but frame it around them and their belief? I feel like all the time what we try to do is give people so much information. Here's 20 reasons why you should buy a Chevy instead of a Ford. Here's 100 reasons why you should do this instead of that. That's when we get into trouble. You want to have one thing that they're going to remember and that's going to stick with them. And then underneath that, you can have a few, three, no more than three things to break through. And then finally, I always say, like, come up with a visual. Come up with a visual language that's gonna become memorable and sticky. Because if you think how busy people are, on average, people are getting 5,000 marketing messages a day. So how are you gonna break through that clutter? So I use this example, and forgive me, this is in politics, but the example of President Trump, when he was running for office, he didn't say he was getting tough on immigration. He said he was gonna build a wall. That's visual language. And that's the kind of thing that I encourage people to do when you're trying to come up with your sales story or your marketing plan. What is the visual language that's going to help people really remember what you're all about? Because you have to realize that most of these decisions are going to happen when you're not in the room. You're going to give your sales pitch, you're going to leave your materials, you're going to do whatever it is you're going to do, and then on goes on to the next. People have to remember what you said. And after this conversation, what are people going to remember? Just a couple of things. You want to make sure that you are sticky as you possibly can.
Right. So you say that one thing. So like sticking with Ford and Chevy, right? Maybe one benefit, what if it's like you got better gas mileage, but you also have a better towing capacity, and you call on two different organizations with big fleets, maybe one is more interested in the gas mileage and the other is more interested in the towing capacity. How do you still pick one, or do you try to dig in and uncover their one thing and then massage your message?
So what I would say is when you have a lot of facts that you could use that depend on your target audience and the person you're talking to, is I try to say, what is the higher order principle that you want to communicate? Is it that the overall thing I want you to know is that Ford is going to work harder for you? And so then you have a higher order thing, the master narrative is it's going to work harder for you. And then underneath it, you're going to have the three ways it's going to work harder for you that you're going to be able to lever up depending on who you talk to. But again, I think you're right. You've got to go back to that bigger picture, which is who is it that you're talking to and what's most important to them. And so I think first you have to have something that's even higher order than the facts. So you have what you're talking about is a proof point or a fact that's underneath the story that you want to be telling. You have to have your bigger story that you want to be telling. That bigger story is that it worked harder or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what it would be. We could spend some time tooling around what it might be. And then underneath it, that's when you pull in the different facts.
Yeah, because it can be a little tough, right? Because I know what you're saying, that's higher order, but how do you keep that higher order message from sounding like a pitch or a cliche? Ford says they work harder and Chevy says, Toyota says they're going to work harder. So yeah, that's just all, you're just pitching me, dude, whatever, I got to go.
Yeah, I think that, that's a common, it's a common criticism that people have about some things that are more of a marketing message. I think you have to find the one that is true to who you are and you repeat it over and over and over again. I think it's really, really important that whatever it is that you embrace it and understand this is part of the process. Because if you think about it, right, and just to go back to, if you want to talk about President Trump for a second, he used Make America Great Again. And he said it over and over and over again. Part of your job here is that you want to create an advocate that somebody else can repeat your message for you. So if you've got something that, Ford works harder for you, and you repeat it over and over, then you want other people to say, well, Ford's going to be the one that works harder for you, right? And here's why. Everything else will ladder up to that point so that it becomes truly ownable. So if it's a bigger towing capacity, if it's whatever the things are underneath it, and all of that can get repeated over and over again, no matter what it is that you're talking about. And I think it's got to be something that everything ladders up to, that you live it, that you breathe it, that you own it. It can't just be something that you slap on and you're like willing to walk away from it at whim. It's got to be something that's going to work really hard for you. And when it works, and when you see these things in action, you'll see that there's a real difference. You become known for that one.
Yeah. Now, is this something, this is more, would you say this is a branding campaign more than just like a quick hit, sort of a sales presentation? Because, Trump used that for a good 18 months probably, right?
More. Still using it.
You know, salespeople are like, dude, I'm listening to this. I gotta hit my quota, you know, this quarter, you know, give me that slogan now. So it's, you know, it's just more of a comprehensive, you know, corporate wide, company wide branding campaign to be used for 2, 3, 5, even 10 years.
Well, look, I think that there are, you know, I think this just as easily applies to a product sale as it does to a brand. I think that the thing is you need to know what that one thing is that you want to be known for. And if it's not as polished or brandy as that, that's fine. But what is that one thing that you want people to leave the conversation with, so when they're making the decision, go, okay, it's that. Because the problem with just having it be about one fact or one proof point or towing capacity is what happens the moment that you're not the best at towing. What happens the moment that, you know, somebody else can say, well, you might not think about towing capacity. You might need to think about overall whatever. You can get in an arms race. And arms races are fine in the short term if that's what you want to play. But in the long term, if you have a bigger narrative, then it's consistent, continuous kind of thing that grows and allows you to have more conversations and it's more repeatable. Because if that person who bought because of towing capacity, for example, is then going to tell their friend about it and they don't care about towing capacity, but they might care about something else.
Right.
You want to be able to carry that advocacy. And so I think that it's not just about branding. It's not just about marketing. This also works in sales. This might not be as, you know, as big picture in that kind of way as like a, you know, a tagline, so to speak, but I think it is just equally as important.
Yeah. And
you know, we find it like even in product sales. So for example, in financial services sales, we, you know, when we're talking about how do you sell more variable annuities or something, it's about how do you talk about this in a way that matters to people. People aren't sitting there out there going like, you know what I really want to buy today is a variable annuity. I've been sitting there thinking, wait till somebody, you know, what I wanted every single day. But if you tell, what we found is that if you talk to people and say, you know what, I want to talk to you about protected growth. And what people will say is protected growth. I want to grow my assets and I want protection. That's great. That's a conversation you can have. That's not a product sale. And it's not then about talking about, here's the 5% guaranteed minimum death benefit. Like people don't think that way or care that way, right? What matters to them is this idea of protected growth on their asset. And then you can have a more meaningful conversation. So I think it still is about finding that way in, even in a product sale, that's going to be something that's a master narrative that you get over and over again, a bigger picture than just one.
Now, how long would you say this can last? Because I use examples all the time of like the army, you know, be all you can be, an army of one, be army strong. I mean, so even big, well-known entities like the army have to at least semi-regularly change that value proposition, change that message. Is that just ad fatigue? You know, we get tired of it. I mean, because the army hasn't really changed in a couple hundred years.
Right. So look, I think that the answer to that question is it depends. Oftentimes, I think that you can have a message for a few years and it's not a problem. I tell my clients that if you haven't gotten nauseous from repeating your message, it probably hasn't even begun to get traction, because what you think somebody's heard a lot, they haven't heard a lot, right? And so I think sometimes people are too soon or change their message too quickly because they're tired of it before everybody else is. I think the key is to look at when trends are changing. Is it time to change your message? If there's a new entrant into your category or a new competitor that suddenly might cause you to rethink that's important. Or what other outside events might cause you to rethink your messaging? And so that can be something in the financial markets. It can be something, there are any number of different things that would cause you to reevaluate what it is that you're talking about. But for the most part, I think you can stick with a message for a while.
Right. All right. Can company do this on their own? Because it seems this is hard, right? Because basically we're kind of self-evaluating ourselves, right? The analogy I always use, and I was talking about like when I was learning how to play golf and I would take lessons, and this one guy, he filmed and I only hit the club like 5 times. He filmed me from the top, from the front, from behind. And this was 1993, 5 swings of the club. And then we just analyzed my swing for 30. But seeing from the outside in, you know, the old adage, you can't read the label from inside the bottle, right? Seeing my own swing. I mean, of course he helped me with what he was teaching, but just seeing it was like, oh my gosh, I could see everywhere that I was off. But it took an outside perspective. I mean, can it be done internally?
So it can. I mean, I would love to say that you need to hire me in order to do it.
And when you're full, when your calendar's full, they can hire me. But anyway, continue.
But I think the most important thing is that you don't just do it inside a vacuum. And so, yes, you can do it yourself, but I think it requires you talking to people who are not you. So if you are trying to reach certain customers, talk to those customers. If you're trying to reach certain individuals or outsiders, talk to those individuals and outsiders. Don't try to guess what they're going to think. Don't try to guess what they believe. Don't try to guess any of it. Have real conversation. My firm at Ms. Lansky, we always say it's not what you say that matters, it's what people hear. So you're not going to know what other people are hearing unless you have that conversation. And if you think about, everybody has this thought bubble over there, and we never get a chance to look inside it, say, what is it really that they're really thinking when they product? What is thinking when I say this. The object of this exercise is really get inside of it, understand it, have a meaningful understanding of what's going on so that you can reach it. So I wouldn't say that you can do it totally alone. You can do it internally, but it involves some outreach.
Well, and I would say too, it probably takes some humility, huh? Because if the CEO is entrenched, I know this is my baby, I built this from my garage, and I borrowed money from my mom, and this is the message. Like, yeah, okay, boss, we're not going to get anywhere on these.
Yeah, I'll never forget this one time we were with the CEO of a really large company, and my partner and I were leaving. The partner had given the CEO some pretty real criticism of their speech, and this person said to my partner, "No one's ever told me before that I didn't do a good job." We're like, "Well, you're the CEO, and I guess you're kind of intimidating. Like you hiss sometimes." So
right.
I think that oftentimes they don't get that kind of. I think it's really important that you get that real, rich feedback, because if it were that everybody loved everything we're saying, we wouldn't be in this polarized environment.
Right. So I feel like we've talked a lot about kind of the big picture, right? Are there things we can apply like one-on-one, or at a conference table, trying to like just in a meeting, right? Maybe we've successfully landed the meeting. We've got the Ford buyer, and we're Chevy, like they've agreed to meet with us. How does this apply like brass tacks, right? You got an hour for this meeting. How can we be more persuasive?
So, I think that you have to look at, is your objective, right, is to change their mind. You know that they've got an opinion. You know that they've got a well-held belief. Your job is to sort of break through and give them a moment of pause. So you want them to go, I never thought about it that way before. I never thought that before. So how do you make that happen? It's not going to be peppering them with too much information. It's not going to be just solely based on facts. So you have a couple of tools at your disposal. And I think one of them that's very, very powerful is storytelling. And so oftentimes, storytelling's been done for years and years and ages, and there's been reasons for that because it creates an emotional connection and it's hard to argue with a story. So I say that one of the things that you have as a tool at your disposal is storytelling. And by that, I mean an anecdote, something that you can tell somebody they can't dispute, that they can't argue with, that's going to be representative of the larger point that you're trying to make. So if the point you're trying to make is about towing capacity, tell a story about that. Say how surprised you were when you learned about something. Talk about the actual act of towing and what it meant and how much you could do and whatever the difference it made and all of those kinds of things. Because then you're going to reach somebody. But I say that it's not enough just to tell a story and just to have a good anecdote. Those are really making connections. Oftentimes we'll say, well, is that the one-off? Is that just something you're just telling me this one time happened? Because I'm so entrenched in my belief, I'm skeptical. So if you can tell that story, but then have the fact support it and say, this is a larger, this is something that's larger that can apply to more. So what's the fact? Got more towing capacity, but X, Y, Z, and make sure that you get that fact in there. But I think that's one thing that we have at our disposal that really creates an action. But if you remember what your job is, if you want somebody just to walk away and say, I never thought about it that way, maybe I'll give them a chance, or at least I want more. That's your job in creating that connection. And that's all you have to do. And I think that will change the kind of dynamic that you have, because sometimes we go in and we think that our job is, we must sell them this and it's so much. And I think when we engage in a different way, it's going to create better conversation.
You talk about in your book coming up kind of with your own new category, right? Was it language strategy? Is that what you called it? Mm-hmm. So what's the risk reward on carving out something new, right? Because on the one hand, it's unique, right? It's going to stand out, but could it be too unique? And then they're afraid, like they haven't heard of it, they don't understand it, so they stay away from it.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's a real challenge, right? So for us, when we were coming up with what are we going to be as a firm? Are we going to be a consulting firm? Are we going to be a base firm? Or a communications agency? What we found is that for us, the challenge with all of those things was that it created a misunderstanding in who we were, because all of those had pretty strong conceptions of what it is, and all of them had budget lines that were different than what our budget line was. So for us, having that same title as other firms was going to create a bigger problem for us than it was worth. For many people, that's not the case. For many people, being in that budget line is important. Say that I know I have this amount of money to spend on that, I'm going to spend it somewhere, helps you. And so I think you really need to understand, what does it mean for you to be in that category rather than create a new category? And I would argue for most people, it's better to be in a category that's already existing than to create its own. Creating its own is very, very difficult and very, very challenging because, again, there's the budget line item, there's the, how do you get known? There's the branding problem, there's the reputational problem, there's a lot of problems with it. So, but I think it's important to really think those things through and figure out what is most important to you. And that's really one of the most important parts of persuasion outside of active empathy, which I've talked about, is being really clear on your objective. What is it that you want? What are the limitations to that too, is the next step in that, which is being really real about what the problems are. So if your objective is to create a new category, you better be really real about what the limitations are and how hard it's going to. So it's just something you really really have to.
Is the medium the message, or is the message still the message?
The message to me is still the message. Now, I think this is really interesting because, as somebody who focuses exclusively on messaging, there was a period of time, I've been doing this for about 15 years. There was a period of time that I thought, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to language and messaging? Because everything was about viral videos and everything was about, and everybody was saying that the medium is message, medium is message. And we were wondering, is it ever going to turn into emoticons and emojis and what's going to happen? But because we are living in this world where we have no attention, and I put myself in that. I think we're all addicts of new technology where it's like we really, our attention spans are shorter and shorter. All you have is a few words to get your point across. And if you don't do it well, impactfully in a short amount of time, you're in trouble. And so for me, and I've seen our business just take a huge, in the last 3 years, we've almost doubled in size because so many big companies, so many people understand the importance of messaging language. If it's not consistent across all of these different ways that you use it, whether it's video, whether it's social media, whether it's online, whether it's in conversation, whether email, whatever it is, however you're reaching out to people, it's got to be consistent because message is so important. Having it consistent on the same page across mediums is so important. So I say that's the most important thing.
So, and everybody has a limited budget, right? I'm thinking of like my typical listeners in the SMB space. They don't have a 9-figure marketing budget, right? They don't even have a 6-figure market budget. But I see people all the time, like I'll see their websites and they're linking to their Pinterest page and their Instagram page, and I go click on it. It's like they haven't updated that in 2 years.
Right.
Should they just remove those? I mean, just focus where they can really make an impact, right? Like like a drop of water, right? Just keep pounding away at the one where they can be good, or do you need to be everywhere because people are so distracted and it is so noisy?
No, I think where you show up, you need to really show up. So I wouldn't have links to places that you're not active in. I think it makes you look worse. If you click on something and say like, wow, you haven't been on there since 2 years, or it has nothing to do with your business. Like if you're linking to your Pinterest page and it's, it's how to decorate your daughter's room and not how to, how to grow your business, I don't think that you're doing the right. So I think the important thing is to have focus and repeat and be doing all of the right things. And I understand people in smaller businesses are on limited budgets. I think, not to toot my own horn or anything, but the book in Persuasion, there's 9-step box to make your own persuasion plan. You have your one master narrative, your few proof points, your visuals, your stories. You can just hammer it home. Once you have a plan like in place, everything else becomes easier. And I think that's what people need to do. Focus on what you do well and cut out the rest, because the rest of it isn't as important as showing up where you're going to show up. That's where you're going to have the most impact.
Yeah, because it can be, like you said, if you're not nauseated by your message, you haven't said it enough. And I don't know if this is true or not, or one of those apocryphal kind of stories. Talking about, it was Henry Ford, came in and said, man, hey, I'm tired of this message. I think we got to change the message, blah, blah. And they were like, Mr. Ford, we haven't even launched the message yet.
Yeah.
Right? Like just the planning of the campaign and the marketing, he was just tired of it. So he think, yeah, everybody's tired of it. And I'm like, dude, we haven't even run the ad.
It's true.
So,
it's true.
As entrepreneurs, right, we're drawn to all these things and a bunch of irons in the fire, but we can be a victim of our own ADD, huh?
Completely. I mean, I know the day that, or a few days after my book went live, I did 20-something radio interviews, right? By the end of the day, I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to be so tired of hearing XYZ, about active empathy, or about the subtitle of my book, which is I'm convincing others when facts don't seem to matter. Nobody had heard it. I did 25 interviews and I might have been tired by saying it that day, but it hadn't even begun to get traction. So
right.
We can't walk away from something before it's even gotten traction. We know that people need to hear a message about 7 times before it sticks for them. So how do you even get them to hear it 7 times if you haven't said 1,000,000? Yeah. That's the real challenge, I think.
Well, now you made it on the sales podcast. You can retire. So congratulations.
There you go.
Well done.
Thank
All right.
you.
So where should we send people? I've got a copy of your book. I'm going to link to your website as well. Is there a memorable URL we can give people to send them on their way?
You could just put leehartleycarter.com and available for purchase on Amazon. Great.
Very nice. All right. We will link there. So when are you coming to California?
I am coming next week, actually. I'll be in LA.
Oh, very nice.
Yes.
Well, send your helicopter because I rarely go to LA.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But is that for work or
it is.
reading the book or what?
I'm doing some focus groups.
Client work. Very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, safe travels. If you get like an extra, 5 hours and you want to sit in traffic and come out to Murrieta, California, come see me, it'll be worth it. I guarantee. Just saying. I'm
in and out in a day, so I doubt that will happen, but maybe one of these times.
Yeah. People are like, how far are you? I'm like, well, no traffic, 90 minutes, with traffic, 4 days. I mean, so it's
Good grief.
It's insane. All right.
Man. All right.
Well, Lee Carter. Carter, all the way from
Thank
New
you
York
so
City.
much.
Thanks for coming on the show.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
It's not what you say, it's what they hear. Amen. Let me tell you something. This is harder to do than it sounds. This is literally like learning a new language. I've given TEDx talks. I've given, 1 hour, 90-minute, keynote sessions, learning how to deliver in this type of media, how to engage prospects with stories. If you have not done it, it is hard. Get her book. It will help, but who's going to hold you accountable and test the things? What sounds good in your head may not sound good on paper. You need to make sure get somebody else that's qualified, right? Not a family member, not your spouse, or your 5-year-old daughter to review what you're working on. It's better doing it with someone else. Learn from my mistakes, learn from my victories on helping you figure out how to get your point across. You've got to do it quickly. It's interesting. Twitter increases their character count from 144, now I forget what it is, 250, 260, whatever. But it was a big enough increase that you could make an impact, but it's still very small. But it was a good exercise to help tighten up your stuff. And even with a bigger count, it's still not much. It helps you tighten up your message. That's a good place to practice. Tighten up your message. Boil it down to its essence, but it needs to be around a story, not facts. How good are you at doing that? You want to get better? Come join us. All right. 30daysalesgrowth.com. Hit me up on the interwebs. Twitter, it's Sales Whisperer. Same on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm posting a lot of content there lately, having a lot of success. I actually shared in our call last week on the things I'm doing on LinkedIn both for free and for using some tools that are very affordable. Don't have a big contract, locks you in, but great success in contacting with people to be on podcasts. And I'm doing it now, starting some outreach for just actual sales. The bulk stuff is fantastic. I've always done that, but doing some one-on-one outreach, man, it's more powerful than ever if you have a good message, if you know how to connect. And those are things I've been sharing for basically pennies or a couple dollars a day in the 30-day sales growth group. So if that can help you, and again, no onerous contract, month to month, come join us. All right. And then hit me up on the interwebs. Let me know you're out there. Oh yeah. And subscribe to this, would you? Subscribe and share it. It helps. Helps me buy lollipops for Ava. Okay. And look, she sounded cute and she needs more lollipops. So help me get her some sugar. Thanks for listening. I'll go sell something.